Make a video, everyone. There's a lot of stuff to talk about as usual. So, getting right into it, Canada's up to 92,767 cases, 7,416 dead. Alberta had just 19 new cases yesterday. We're down to 344 active cases. I mean, the hospital numbers are down. ICU numbers are still the same, but the hospital numbers are down under 50 now, so that's good. Um, Basically, I mean, it's same old, same old. The government refuses to. It seems like they just refuse to admit they're wrong. So they're just going to keep doubling down. I mean, I know there's another thing to get to, but again, it's just so obvious that things should be open right now that it's really not even funny. And especially with the whole rioting slash protesting, depending on where you're at. I know in Calgary yesterday there was looked like thousands, possibly even tens of thousands of people that gathered at the rally, all very close quarters, and yet nobody cared. And yet you talk to all these complete and utter idiots you see on social media and some of them in person that talking about reopening. Oh, we can't reopen Calgary. Whatever we do, if we reopen, it'll be chaos. Everybody's going to die. And yet, not a word from all those, for lack of a better word, idiots. And again, I don't mince lightly anymore. I mean, these people are people that just refuse to admit they're wrong. It doesn't matter how much evidence piles up in their face. It doesn't matter how much they contradict themselves, but be perfectly fine with 10,000 people gathering at a rally, very close quarters. In fact, like borderline mosh pit close quarters. And yet, they're not okay with a salon opening with 10 employees and maybe 5 people at a time in there. Like, no, god forbid 10, 15, 20 people gather. God forbid 50 people are in a gym, but if 10,000 want to gather in a very close quarters, then that's perfectly fine. So again, these people, they're absolutely insane. Again, they've lost all credibility. I mean, they already did, but this is just another example of them losing credibility. So anyway, the first thing I wanted to talk about here is a thing from Global News. Now they say advocates are calling on Ontario government to declare anti-black racism a public health crisis, and then they link to a Twitter poll: should anti-black racism be declared a public health crisis? And 76.5% of people say no. About 7,500 votes. So again, it's not a. I'm not going to say it's the most legit poll you've ever seen, but I mean, the one thing to point out too is that people who are on social media tend to be people that are, in their 20s, 30s, and 40s. It would be the main demographic, which are the people that are most exposed to what modern society is like. And if that group of people, and if you pull the older demographic, I bet they would be even more likely because they grew up in a time when racism was more prevalent. So again, this is just goes. And again, the problem is people always. I mean, they'll twist your words no matter what you say. If you disagree with them in the slightest, they'll, accuse you of. They'll in their mind you're the equivalent to Hitler, basically, which really sucks. But um, that's the way it is. People just are so irrational nowadays that you see all these people on social media, and it's the same old that they think that, oh, there's no middle ground, and yet you have these people. Most of these people, what they're supporting is BLM, which wants to, like I pointed out yesterday, they want to defund the police. Um, they have, I mean, like I say, defunding the police. Like, how do you suggest that's going to work out? The problem is that they destroy their own stuff. They don't actually advocate for real change. All they advocate for is victimization, the victim mentality, which again, some people, yeah, they are victims, but everyone's not a victim. Um, and it's not going to fix the problem. The only way the problem is going to go away is if we stop pretending that society it has this rampant racism. Like I see these people posting on social media about, oh, I can't stand all these racist people in my comments section, and yet they'll point out examples of them, and they can't point out or sorry, they'll try to point out an example of them, but they can't. Their idea is, oh, if you disagree with me, that means you're a racist. In other words, if you think that rioting and looting isn't a good thing, and if you think that defunding the police isn't a good idea, then you're a racist. Like, this is where we're at. Like, we need to have a common sense middle ground here, people. Like, let's just have a common sense middle ground. Like, it's not that hard. Racism can be an issue on one hand, and on the other hand, defunding the police and all these crazy ideas that these people have can be bad in the same. Like we can have a middle ground. It is possible. And pretending that we can't, just you're part of the problem, because the problem is that these people's solution to the problem that they perceive is not going to fix the problem. It's only going to make it worse. And when they realize that it only makes it worse, we're going to be right back where we started. Oh, racism, this terrible problem. And it's just this terribly, terrible spiraling circle that people don't just seem to want to take a step back and be like, hey, are we taking the right approach to this? And they're not. So until they realize that, then nothing's going to change. Um, this is from Jason Kenny. He says, if the virus cases hold, I would expect we move to stage 2 relaunch ahead of schedule. We had the lightest public health restrictions in Canada, and incredible responsibility shown by Albertans for better results. That's something Albertans can be proud of. Now, again, this is just very frustrating that why are we waiting so long? It's been, what, 3, almost 4 weeks since quote unquote stage 1. Why do we have to keep waiting? Like, why do we have to keep waiting? And these protests and rioting has been going on in the States for over a week now. It's been going on in Canada for, what, a few days? And yet we still have yet to see this massive spike. And if we don't see a massive spike, like I've mentioned before, but I'm going to keep mentioning, it is definitive proof that this whole lockdown stuff was complete and utter garbage, like complete and utter garbage. So anyway, this is from Sticks Hexenhammer 666. He points out, if you want a reason to protest, one dude being murdered seems a bit less important than the government unilaterally defying the entire U.S. Constitution for the last 2 months and jailing people for swimming or sitting on the beach. Now, people constantly twist this as, oh, you're happy, you're a racist, you're happy that Floyd was killed. And no, nobody is saying that. Again, I've yet to see anybody complaining on social media about this rampant racism. I mean, it does exist to a small degree, but I've yet to see people give a definitive example of someone actually supporting real racism. Like, I haven't. So, and this is the problem, that far more people have died because of the lockdowns for no reason. For no reason. I seen a report today that 95% of Canadians that have died are seniors. And we've had numbers that have hinted at this for over a month now. Why in the world do we not reopen and advise seniors? Again, most of them, well, in fact, probably almost all of them, probably, I don't know, 80-90% of seniors probably don't work. If they do work, it's part-time most likely. So again, just instruct them, stay home, quarantine, and the rest of us can go on with our lives. Because if I was a senior, I would view it as incredibly, incredibly selfish to have to destroy my kids and my grandkids' lives for years, possibly, uh, just because a virus that has a little bit better chance for them of killing them than the flu is coming around. Like, and again, it doesn't change things. Like, they can continue to quarantine and self-isolate regardless of whether or not the rest of the world goes back to normal. Like, it doesn't really change anything. So I don't understand the hiccup there. Um, This is from Stefan Molyneux. He points out a very good point that I pointed out before, but again, people just don't seem to understand. Most of them not watching this video probably, but anyway, so he says the left government-run police forces are bigoted and murderers. Um, Also, the left, the government should run pretty much everything. And again, how do you view this? How do you have this as your worldview? Like, the problem is that they're right to an extent, that there is some people in the police that are bigoted and abuse their power. That is true to a degree, but the problem is that there's so much tension that, again, we need to have a common sense middle ground. We need to um, have harsh penalties for cops who abuse their power. But the problem is, a lot of cops walk around on eggshells, because if they screw up in the slightest degree, then their life is completely over. I mean, look at the guy who shot Michael Brown. I mean, he was perfectly justified in doing what he was doing. I mean, Mike Brown, armed robbery. He robbed a liquor store. He tried grabbing the cop's gun. He punched him in the face. Yeah, if you do that kind of stuff, you do not deserve. You deserve whatever's coming to you. Again, if you try and take someone's weapon, you deserve to die. Don't take people's, especially when you're the one that initiates the exchange. Like, come on. But again, the guy's life is completely destroyed. I mean, he probably can't even go out in public anymore. I think he's like witness protection and all that kind of stuff. And again, he was perfectly just. I mean, the hands up, don't shoot mantra I see is going around at all these protests. It was made up. The autopsy definitively showed that it was no hands up, don't shoot execution style that the most of the a lot of not most of them, but a lot of these protesters believe. Again, it's not true. Now, George Floyd, absolutely, completely, and utterly unjustified what that cop did. He's being charged with murder, and rightfully so. Now, was it premeditated, cold-blooded murder? No. I think it was probably more or less likely a guy on a power trip, a guy having a bad day. Uh, I mean, the cop had multiple complaints against him before, I recently heard. So again, it was more than likely a cop who enjoyed, having his power trips and, abusing his power, and uh, probably having a bad day. And George Floyd, wrong place at the wrong time. He didn't deserve what happened to him. But we also have to recognize that the vast majority of cops are not the the kind of guy that was like the guy that killed George Floyd. So we need to have a common sense middle ground. And again, if we're gonna fix this problem of racism, we can't pretend that people that aren't racist are racist. We need to, because the problem is that so many people do that nowadays. You devalue the word, in that most people on the right, when they hear someone being accused of being racist, they don't take it seriously because they know that the left accuses pretty much anyone who disagrees with them of being racist. I mean, a lot of people on the right, I would say the majority, view it as even better, in that not they're racist, in that the left usually plays the race card when they can't win the argument. So again, that's usually a sign of someone who kind of knows what they're talking about. But um, anyway, the last thing I wanted to bring up is Jason Kenney. Again, I don't understand how he can constantly bring up, oh, we're doing so good, we're ahead of schedule, and then he brings this up about the average age of people who die of the virus is 83, and the average life expectancy in Alberta is 82. So what in the world are we doing? Like, why in the world are we destroying our economy, destroying people's livelihoods, for the sake of saving people's lives who already are living longer than the average person? Like, how does that make any sense whatsoever? Now, again, this doesn't mean, oh, I'm happy. I think we should be killing. No, I'm saying is that if I was in their position, I would not want to destroy people's livelihoods just so I can live an extra year or two when I'm in my 80s. Like, I mean, you don't have any much of your life left to destroy. You got to sit in bed or sit on the couch all day and do nothing, most of them at least. Uh, you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. I mean, even younger than that. You got pretty much your whole life left to live. But how many people have committed suicide from this? That's a very common problem that I know people personally that have committed suicide, and it's a tear. And again, these are people that still had a lot of their lives left to live. But again, it just bothers. Again, this is something that people may think, oh, you're being hyperbolic or something. No, this is something that has affected me personally and affected family members personally. So yes, it is personally. I don't know anybody who knows anybody who's had the virus. In fact, I know people who think they've had it, but because they're younger and they're just basically had a bad cold kind of thing, they had a fever. But I don't know anybody who has had it, and who I don't know anybody or know anybody. And I have family members that are in the healthcare industry. I don't know anybody who has had it and has been in the hospital. I don't know anyone. So, it's not to say that my experience is the experience of everybody, but the numbers very well back it up that we're overreacting. This, I guess, is the best way of putting it. So, um, and again, the fact that nobody seems to care with all these protests going on now just goes to show that it actually isn't an issue to most of these people. It's largely just a political polarization, my side against your side BS. So anyway, if you like the video, make sure to hit that like and subscribe. Check out my PayPal and email, got linked in the description. Again, appreciate any donations. At the very least, just hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already. And last couple things, as always, check me out on Twitter if you haven't already, and check me out on BitChute as well.